Chapter 3, January 12th, 2201, Denver, Topside. As he pushed the door open, he had to push hard to get through the drift of snow that piled up overnight. It was bright, too bright, as the sun reflected off the white all around him. He took a moment to acclimate, squinting his eyes through the light before he was ready to move on. He closed the door behind him. The location of the door was inside a small, closed parking lot. A few cars remained, but most of them had been stripped of parts or decayed to the point that they were just piles of rust now. If he hadn't seen the old pictures on the terminal, he would have no idea what cars used to look like. Driving was a thing of the past. For most people, they walked the corridors or used the moving pathways to get where they were going. Thinking about it, he had never actually seen a car below in New Denver either. As he crossed the parking lot and headed for the exit, he still couldn't believe how peaceful it was here. There were no sounds, nothing but the wind. When he reached the exit, he noticed a patch of ice, but his new boots gave him the traction he needed, and he was out the door and onto the street in a flash. He remembered that the building he thought was a restaurant was a few sectors to the right from here. Oops, he meant blocks. That is what they were called topside. He stayed close to the buildings as he walked. He had never seen anyone topside, but it was always possible, so better safe than sorry. Plus, he hoped to avoid another encounter with those dogs. As he walked, he thought about how amazing it was that so many of the buildings remained. While the glass was broken out of most of the windows and the wooden buildings lay in ruins, most of the steel skyscrapers still held their shape. One day he attempted to go up one of the skyscrapers, but most of the staircases were in pieces and it made for a dangerous trip. He still remembered that trip up to the skyscraper like it was yesterday. It was one of his first attempts topside, and he chose the closest skyscraper to the parking lot. As he entered the building, he couldn't believe how intricate the lobby was. It was probably the biggest place he had seen beyond the underground farm. He stood there in awe for a moment, contemplating the sheer size. It was early in the summer, so the weather was nice, and he felt warm enough without a jacket. There wasn't much for a freelancer to take. There was a crumbling couch and chairs in the middle of the lobby, and a mammoth front desk. At the front desk, he found an unopened drawer, so he pulled it open. As he did, it came apart in his hands. The termites had ripped it to shreds. Something shiny fell to the ground with the wood splinters. Cooper reached down and dug through the wood pieces to find the shiny object. At first, he thought it was a gold knife, but no, it was just a letter opener. It wasn't sharp, and it looked like the one he remembered from a photo in his history class. New Denver was based on an electronic communication system, using email and messaging. There was no need for paper or letters anymore. However, the letter opener was still a cool item, and it was his first find as a freelancer, so he had to take it. He moved from behind the front desk back out onto the lobby, looking for anything else of value. When there was nothing else, he decided to find the stairs and go up. There were over 30 floors in this building, so he wondered what treasures might lie above. For some reason, the door to the stairs was propped open, and he could see up. It was dark, but there appeared to be light coming from above, so he wouldn't need his flashlight. He bounded up the first flight of stairs, not really thinking about the consequences. As soon as he reached the first landing, he heard the creaking. Deciding to take a chance, he kept going up. And that was when disaster struck. The railing he was grabbing bent in his grip, and the cement below him started crackling and falling. He released the railing and started bounding up faster as everything collapsed around him. He had just enough energy to jump up to the next landing. When the dust and the cement settled, he was hanging onto the second floor landing. Oh no, Cooper thought. He didn't quite have the strength to get up to the landing, and he was at least 10 feet up from the floor below. There was no other choice. He had to let go and hope for the best. As he hit the ground, he felt his ankle twist, and something scraped against his leg. He lay there for a moment in the dust and debris before deciding it was best to get out of the stairwell and assess his injuries. He crawled down the pile of broken cement and out the door back to the lobby. He lay there in the lobby for a few minutes, staring up at the high ceiling, wondering if this whole freelance thing was a good idea. His ankle hurt, and he noticed that his pants were ripped and there was blood dripping from his shin where he cut himself on the cement as he fell. I guess this is what Glenn meant about no one being available topside for support, he thought. He would need to limp his way back down to New Denver and make up a story at the infirmary about how he got hurt. He couldn't tell them it was topside. He would have to lie. Maybe he could tell them that he tripped and fell on the pathways, and that's how he cut himself. After that event, Cooper only examined buildings on the ground floor. This posed a bit of a problem, though, as most of the items of value were taken from the easy ground floor targets during and after the riots. But sometimes he got lucky. His ankle still hurt sometimes on the longer trips, but he had survived. He continued down the blocks, passing buildings that he already scavenged in previous adventures. There was the leather shop where he had found 3 belts that he traded for the homemade biscuits, the dress shop where he had found a package of fancy green lace buried under mounds of moth-eaten cloth. Then he saw the housing unit where he had tried the crazy adventure into the tunnels. A few months back, Cooper was doing some research about Denver on the terminal and discovered that many housing buildings had basements where tenants would store their valuables that they couldn't fit in their apartments. So one day he decided to explore one of them. It turned out that the building he chose had an underground passageway connecting to the building next door. He entered the apartment building at the ground level and quickly found the stairs leading down. He learned his lesson from the skyscraper and checked the stairs carefully before proceeding. It was dark and dank down there, so he pulled his flashlight out to scan the area. The stairs creaked going down, but didn't give. When he reached the bottom, he saw what he was looking for, the tunnel. As he approached the opening, he thought carefully about this. Was it really worth going through this passageway? Would there be something of value on the other side? He decided to go for it, despite his misgivings. As he proceeded forward, he noticed there were doors lining the left side of the wall. Some were open and empty, but others contained crumbling boxes. He looked through some of them. However, water had wreaked havoc on most of the boxes, and they stunk of mold. He opened one door and found a box filled with cans of food. The labels were mostly worn off, and after more than 50 years, could the food still be good? He decided to take a couple just to see. That was when he heard the noises coming down the hall. At first he thought it might be people, but no, that can't be. Then he heard the scratching against the wood. It almost sounded like something scurrying. He poked his head out from the closet where he was hiding and used his flashlight to point down the tunnel. What he saw made him jump. Rats! And there were hundreds of little red eyes staring at him. In his history class, he read that rats were mostly scared of humans, but with humans gone from the picture topside, they were more like wild dogs, seeking out food wherever they could find it. One freelancer had described being attacked by a pack of them. Cooper didn't want to experience the same thing, so he grabbed a few more of the cans, put them in his bag, and ran back the way he came. The rats continued to scurry towards him, but they stopped to check out the open storage door, which gave Cooper a head start. He made his escape back up the stairs to the light of the sun, lucky to be free of the musty, dark tunnel and the pack of rats. That was the first and last time he would explore tunnels looking for adventure. He came back to reality and realized he was getting closer to the restaurant. As he looked up and down the streets, he was amazed at how many of the buildings he had been in since he had started coming topside. It was strange, also, that he hadn't seen any other freelancers. His friend Glenn was in areas to the south of town, but he thought there may be other freelancers who weren't on the boards or hadn't identified themselves to him. I guess with the rough weather patterns here in Colorado, fewer people were willing to take on this challenge. As he crossed the street one more time, he saw the perfume store that he explored just last month. He rarely smelled scents other than the odor of his dad when he came back from the fire pit every day, but there were a few women in the community who wore perfume. He wasn't sure where they got it, probably still had it from before the riots. Sometimes the scents seemed to attract men, but mostly they just made Cooper sneeze when he smelled them. Interesting, he thought at the time. A perfume shop might have something of value. He crossed the street and entered the perfume store. There was a lot of glass all over the floor. Clearly this place was ransacked during the riots. He walked gingerly through the rusted metal structure that used to be the glass doors. He needed to be careful not to get cut on the door or glass, especially after falling on the stairs. New Denver had an infirmary for his district, but it cost rations for help, unless you could prove it was related to your city job. There was glass of all colors scattered everywhere on the floor, probably from the shattered perfume bottles. He scanned the walls as he walked. It looked like they used to be lined with displays of bottles, but most of them were gone or knocked over. Some of the shelves were still hanging by one or two pegs. It was then that he noticed a small bottle remaining on one shelf. He tiptoed over to the shelf, feeling the crunching of the glass shards under his feet as he went. He reached the bottle and carefully pulled it away, trying not to make the whole shelf fall. Cooper examined it closely. It was a small, diamond-shaped bottle with red tint to it. There was a cap on it, so he took it off and sniffed. It had a sweet fragrance to it, almost like cherry and rain. He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking about women in New Denver. Yes, they would like this scent. He put the cap back on and pocketed it. He moved past the shelf and headed toward the back room. The door appeared to be blocked by a stack of plastic boxes. He opened the boxes one at a time. They were only filled with packing material. He moved them out of the way and opened the back door slowly. He pushed aside some more of the broken glass to get in the door. The room was small and dark. He used the flashlight to scan inside. As he panned the flashlight around the room, he realized it had been picked clean. There was nothing in here but a couple more empty boxes. Then something caught his eye in the corner. He went to the room and slowly approached. It looked like a small electrical box with knobs on the front. He wasn't sure what it was, but he put it in his backpack to check it out when he got home. He closed the door on his way out and headed out the front door. Cooper glanced away from the perfume store, coming back to the real world. It turned out the box he had found was quite valuable. It was an old radio. He was able to get it working again and traded it for a few more rations. Most people could listen to the radio through the terminals, but an old guy wanted it for nostalgic memories. The most valuable item on that trip was the perfume bottle, though. It turned out to be a pretty famous brand of perfume called Cherry Clouds, and a woman traded him a whole set of tools for it. He rounded the corner and saw the building he was thinking might have the restaurant on the ground floor. As he climbed through the big window frame, he could see the vines had taken over most of the front area, and while a few tables and chairs remained, they were covered with the plant and mostly unstable. His progress was slow as he crawled over the collapsed tables and the vines, but he finally approached what appeared to be the bar for serving drinks. Things hadn't changed much in 50 years, even in New Denver. There were bars where people could meet and drink, so he recognized it was right away. He looked behind the bar. There was a lot of broken glass, but nothing of real value. The sun grew in intensity during his walk, and he could see the snow outside was starting to melt. However, it remained quite cold in the restaurant, and he could see his breath as he approached what appeared to be a door to the back. The door seemed to be blocked by something. As he got closer to examine it, he saw a large bookshelf was pushed in front of it. This was interesting. What would be the purpose in doing this? He tried to move the bookshelf, but it was too heavy. He was agile and pretty quick, but not very strong. He would need some leverage to move it. He went back to the dining room and found one of the metal table legs lying on the ground. It seemed to still have its strength despite being covered in the vine. Cooper stripped off the vine and took the table leg back to the bookshelf. He placed it between the wall and the bookshelf at an angle. Using all his weight, he pushed against the table leg. The bookshelf strained, creaked a little, but then the leg bent and it fell against the wall. It looked like it had worked a little, so he went back into the restaurant and found another table leg. Again, he leveraged it against the wall and put his full weight into it. This time the leg held, and the bookshelf creaked again and moved forward some more. Seeing that it was working, Cooper tried again, motivated by the movement. It moved a little more, and he could see the door behind. Another push, and he had enough room to reach the door and open it. To his surprise, it was unlocked, and he pushed the door open into the room. A stale, rancid smell caught him and made him gag. He pushed the door open more, then stepped back to allow some of the awful smell to escape. It was dark in there. Luckily, a freelancer always comes prepared, and he pulled out his trusty flashlight. As he shone it through the door, he could tell that this was not a place that had been ransacked by the riots. Then he saw movement on the ground and what looked like eyes. This made Cooper jump, and he slipped, fell to the ground, and the light went out. He felt the ground quickly, found the flashlight, and turned it on. He realized what he had seen were two rats. Not again, Cooper thought. but these ones seemed to be afraid of humans and must have scurried through a hole in the corner, because when he flashed around the room there were no more eyes peering at him. Cooper moved through the door and started looking around. He was definitely in a kitchen. To one side were grills coated in grease and maggots still feasting on what was left. Down the middle it appeared to be a workstation, and then he saw something on the counter. It was plastic, but something metallic was in it. He approached closer and noticed that it was a set of knives, all kinds. He had hit the jackpot. He pulled one out to look at it. It was a long butcher knife. He thought, this is exactly what the farmer was looking for, and it was actually gleamed a little in the light as he held it up. He rolled up the set of knives in a plastic bag and tied it tight. He wanted to explore more, but then he heard more rustling in the wall. The rats were back, and it sounded like they'd brought the whole family. They were making angry, high-pitched noises as if ready for a battle. It was time to go. Shoots. He hated rats. They always seemed to find him when things were going good. He headed for the door, slipping again and hearing them coming fast. Suddenly, he felt one of them on his back. No! They were around his legs now. He kicked one of them and hit the wall with a splat. He needed to move, and fast. He made it to the door, which was still open a little. As he grabbed the door, he felt another rat land on his head. Luckily, he still had his gloves on and reached up and grabbed the rat and threw it back while he jumped through the door, hitting his body against the bookshelf that was still partially blocking the opening. He stumbled again, but was able to maintain his balance. He was so freaked out by the rats that he failed to close the door behind him, but just moved past the bookshelf and out into the restaurant area. He checked his body as he went, making sure none of the rats were along for the ride. As he got closer to the front of the restaurant, he looked back. The rats were still trailing him, but they slowed, seeing the light in the snow. He made it to the front doors, and the rats turned back. God, that was disgusting. He checked his body again, but it was clear. No rats, and he had the knives. This was a good day, Cooper thought, as he put the knives in the backpack and looked up to the sky with a little cheer. He headed back the way he came, passing the perfume shop. As he passed one large building, he was focused on looking across the street at what appeared to be an old grocery store that he hadn't noticed before, when he almost tripped over an old man against the wall. Cooper! He heard a rough voice, closer to a whisper rather than a yell. This made Cooper stop and turn. He had never seen anyone topside before. There had been rumors that some people never left, but these were mostly told as ghost stories or urban legends. Who are you? Cooper stammered as he stared in fright at the old man before him who had just said his name. The old man was dressed in a heavy coat, and his face had a rough beard that was mostly black, but peppered with gray and white hair. But it was those eyes, clear blue, that grabbed Cooper's attention and showed an intelligence behind them that was quickly confirmed when the man said, My name is no matter. My life is no matter. But what does matter is you, Cooper. Cooper couldn't move. He wanted to turn and run to get away. How does a man he never seen before know who he was? Cooper tried again to show more courage, but it didn't come through as he stammered again. I don't understand. Cooper, you can be so much more than you are now. Don't let your present world hold you back from your purpose, your future. The old man continued, staring directly into Cooper's eyes. I have to go, Cooper said, as he turned to run, but something made him turn back for a second. Cooper, the raiders are coming. Make sure to turn right at the next block and take a different route back to the parking lot, the old man said with a conviction in his voice. The raiders? This was another rumor that had permeated the history of the freelancers. Supposedly, they were a fringe group of rebels who survived the riots and remained on the surface. They didn't scavenge on their own, but sought out freelancers like himself and robbed them of the treasures, leaving them to die topside. Cooper turned again with a nod and ran through the snow, following the advice of the old man in the dark coat and grizzly beard, turning right at the next block. As he got closer to the parking lot, he could hear the raiders approaching. They were yelping and hollering from down the road. If he had gone the same way back, he would have walked right into them. Yet he was exposed here, and they might catch him anyways. He ducked into the nearest building he saw. It turned out to be a small bar, It sounded like the raiders were spreading out down the streets. This meant they would come down the street right in front of where he was now. He moved deeper into the bar, but could hear them coming closer. He had to hide fast. As he reached the back of the bar, he noticed a long booth. It was built out of metal, but along the edge was a seam that was partially open. It had a pair of screws holding it in place. He pulled his screwdriver out and went to work. One of them came loosely, but the other one seemed to be rusted with wear. He looked back through the window. He didn't have much time. He twisted hard and it came loose, snapping the head off the screw. Cooper panicked, but then he noticed that this provided him with an opening on one side. There was just enough room for him to crawl in underneath the booth. He pulled the side back as best he could, threw his backpack in, and then climbed in behind it. He was able to get the metal piece back in place, sort of, as it would have to do for now. Cooper heard them. Cooper could hear them coming much closer. They were in the bar. They were throwing what was left of the chairs around, crashing them against the metal tables. They also found some empty glass bottles and were shattering them against the walls as well. They even threw one at the metal booth Cooper was hiding in, shattering the bottle in a million pieces and making him jump, bumping his head on the underside of the booth in the process. What did they want here in this building? "You idiots," a gruff man said. "Stop wasting time. You know the boss wants us back in a few hours. Check the bar and see if you can find any liquor." Cooper heard some complaints, but they went to work. "Geez, Johnny, this is slave work. Why can't we get the freelancers to go through these buildings for us?" one of the guys complained. "You know the deal," Johnny said. "The boss is working on getting us a few more guys who can do just that. But after that building collapsed last week, he lost the last one. Now stop complaining and get to searching." "Hey, what about this, Johnny?" he heard another one of the raiders say. There was a lot of rumbling and broken glass, and then quiet for a moment. "Ricky, you hit the jackpot. Tequila." "Now we're talking. 2 bottles," Johnny exclaimed. "Bring them with you. Anything else, boys?" They were rummaging and complaining. Then the 3 of them stormed out, crashing glass along the way. Cooper continued to wait. When he hadn't heard anything for more than half an hour, he decided to try and leave. He moved the metal piece aside just a little and looked out. It was quiet, and there didn't seem to be anything but a light little breeze. He crawled out and slowly walked to the door. He got low under a table and looked down both sides of the street. It was then that he finally let his breath out. Whew. It looked like he was okay. It was getting dark outside. He needed to move fast to get back underground. He went out the door of the restaurant and headed back quickly to the parking garage. Along the way he listened, but didn't hear anything else. The raiders must have moved on. He might need to reconsider this whole freelancer thing. Maybe it was time for a change after the dogs yesterday and the raiders today. As he closed the door behind him and saw the stairs back down to New Denver, he breathed a sigh of relief. While he wasn't scared of Topside, so to speak, many of his elders and fellow peers had ingrained in him their strong feeling of fear about the outside world. And let's be honest, today was a rough one. But then he reached in his backpack and felt the set of knives as he headed downstairs. He had done it. He would eat real beef soon.